Hello. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my talk. Today I'm going to talk about something non-technical for a change, about how to stay passionate about your craft. This is going to be like inherently a very personalized story. I'm going to talk about my career, like all of the mistakes I made, the dumb things I did, and also the lessons I learned. And like take everything with a grain of salt. What has worked for me may not necessarily work for you, but I hope that like by giving some insights into like how I experience things, that some of the stuff could also be helpful to you. Before we get started, so I currently work for a company called Plaid. Plaid is like a fintech company, and what we do is essentially two things. We provide access to financial data, and we also do like KYC, Know Your Customer Identity Verification, which is actually the team that I currently work on. Okay, so who am I? I'm obviously like a speaker because I'm standing here on stage, but I'm also like, I used to be an avid blogger. I've done Android for like more than a decade. I've led a team. I'm currently a full stack developer actually, and I work remotely, fully asynchronously even, so my team is on the West Coast. So in order to like work with like a team on the West Coast, I needed to start my own business, so I'm a business owner, and then obviously, or like maybe not obviously, I'm also a father of like 3 kids. So before I can really tell you about like the stuff I've learned, we need to look at like what my career looked like to begin with. And this is not to boast or anything, but it's just like to give you the context. And essentially like my career, if I think back, it consisted of like 4 parts. So like the first part was like learning how to work. So fun fact, I didn't study computer science. I actually studied electrical engineering. And then I joined Philips, and the first thing they asked me is like, hey, what do you want to do, hardware or software? And I just came from school, so I was like, I don't know. And then like there was like 2011, mobile apps were coming up. I had done a bit of Java before, so then I started doing like Android apps, prototypes. But this was like super duper basic stuff, right? I didn't know anything about software architecture. I didn't know anything about testing. I would create like a copy of my folder every day with like backup this date. So I didn't even use like version control. And then like after 2 years of doing that, I decided like maybe I should like specialize and really focus on doing Androids. So I did like consultancy for a while. And this really pushed me quite hard actually, because the salesperson would like sell me as like, oh yeah, this Android developer, he can surely do that. So of course Jeroen can do that, and then I would arrive at the customer, I had no idea how to do that, and then I would have to like figure it out on the spot. So that's the specialization part. The next part is being a team lead. So I've led a team of like 14 developers at Philips Hue. And this was like interesting because like if you're a lead, suddenly people start looking at you for answers, right? And it's a very bizarre feeling, like being in a room on a project that isn't really going well, and then suddenly like everybody looks at you like, hey, Jeroen, what do we do now? And then the final part is like, or at least the part that I'm now in, it's hopefully not the final part of my career, is like going fully remote. So I decided to go and work like fully remotely. And as you can see, I'm now like over a decade into my career, and I think like what's most top of mind for me now is like, okay, where do I now go from here? There's also like a different way of like looking at my career. So I used to be like young and happy, had a bunch of hair, and then over time, you can see the evolution. Some would say that I've gotten bald, but I would argue maybe I've just gotten more efficient because now I can wash my hair here. Like, yeah, who's gonna say who's right? But yeah, at any rate, like, so what were now the defining moments in my career? I think the first thing I realized, like I said, I'm not trained to do software, and I was working in those innovation labs doing lots of cool stuff, but if I would go to a conference and meet people and we would talk, I never had an example of like an app in the Play Store to show for. So then I decided like maybe I should build my own app. And what was initially like a very simple idea, like I wanted to build an app where you could just like change the background on somebody else's phone, so I could essentially like send something funny to my wife in the middle of the day. She would unlock her phone and then see something that would spark joy. That then like cascaded into this file transfer app that worked on like Linux, Mac OS, Windows, and also on Android. And you could do batch transfers. You had like a multicast-based discovery protocol. Pretty cool, actually, but this took me like an inordinate amount of time. Like I spent 6 months full-time working on this. I even ended up taking holidays just to get this like done. So then you could argue, like, was like building my own app, was that like a good use of my time? I think so, just because I was so highly unqualified doing software. And by going through this experience, I really learned what it is to like do all of the steps of like getting an app in the Play Store. And it was a rather technical app, so I also had to like figure out a bunch of stuff on the Android lifecycle and really like got deep into that. So I think for me it was the right thing to do, but just I shouldn't have chosen such a big project. Like I should have at least dropped like the cross-platform stuff. So I think like as a use of my time, it was like a good use, but not a great use. And like my advice to you from this is like what keeps me passionate at my craft is like shipping things, just like this joy of like getting something done and getting it out of the door just has this like inherent satisfaction, like this gamification almost. And like shipping stuff can be like really small, right? It could mean like opening a few PRs per day. It could mean fixing a bug for a customer. It could even like, for instance, something that I've done is like I've built my portfolio and then I would ship like a small poster of like a project I just worked on, or I would ship a blog post. But I think there's just like, for me as a developer, like I consider myself as somebody that creates things, and it's the creation itself that really like drives me and that I'm passionate about. So I would advise you, even if you're working on like a big project, still try to like ship stuff incrementally. And like if that's not possible in the project, maybe just you can pick up a bug for a customer and then like quickly churn it out in an hour, just to get like this fix of like pushing something out. The second defining moment was my very first performance review, and it was pretty bad actually. So I was working at this like innovation lab, and essentially like I was like young and naive, and I would say yes to everything. They would ask me like, hey, can you organize team events? Okay. Can you give trainings? Okay. Can you build like something on Android? Okay. On iOS? Okay. And I would just like do everything. I would also, for some weird reason, do a bunch of meetings and emails. And when I spoke with my boss on my performance evaluation, like I was working there for 1.5 years, then essentially he recognized like, hey, Jeroen, I see you're putting in like a bunch of extra hours that you're working hard, and I was, but you're just not like moving the needle on the thing I like you to move the needle on. And this like was really tough feedback to take for me. But this really like made me wonder like, okay, what does like impact look like? What is really expected of me? What should I really be doing? And I started to like get like very focused on like trying to be like as productive as possible. And like as an example, let's talk about communication. So I think like most of us use some kind of email and some kind of group chat. And just like for yourself, think about this for like a moment, how much time you spend doing this per day. It really starts adding up, doesn't it? And I think another thing you can ask yourself is like doing email, is that what like your boss expects you to do? Is that what like sparks joy to you? And what I've actually started doing is like I've almost entirely stopped doing email. Like I optimized my workflow, so I create a bunch of automated filters, I unsubscribe from a bunch of things, and now like I get like 20 emails per day, but I open up my mailbox, not in the morning, somewhere like in the afternoon, I open it up and I just like click, and then just like archive that. Maybe I'll leave something to read later, but the honest truth is that like mostly I don't even get around to like reading that. And I try to do something similar with Slack, but Slack is a bit more complicated because if I think about my priorities, like my priorities are always like working on the product. And working on the product has like 2 aspects to it. So one is like we're building on it as a team. So like my first priority is always like helping the team. Second priority is like writing the code of the stuff that they expect me to write. And then the third priority is like helping others in the organization. So if somebody pings me on Slack and you're in my immediate team, I will immediately help you out, no question about that. But if you're in some other team at our organization, then I personally don't think this is worth for me to like interrupt my focus time and to like get out of the flow to then go and help you out. So I would still reply to you, but that may be like in 4 hours or in a day, that it would get back to you. And like in all honesty, mostly like those people have already sorted out their issue by then. So like doing this also like avoids others abusing me as like a cheap resource to like solve their problems. So yeah, as a recap, this performance review, like this was a pretty like sizable event to me because it was just, like I was just working. It was my first performance review and it was really bad. I actually ended up leaving the company because I felt so underappreciated. But I think like looking back now, how this has like shaped me and pushed me towards like focusing on impact. I think this has been like a very important event in my career. So I would advise you like focus on impact. Like think about like what does my boss expect of me? What does a good performance review look like? What do I enjoy doing? And then just try to like optimize the rest of the way and do as little of that as you possibly can. And in my experience, like I don't really get like joy from doing meetings or sending emails or whatever, so I just try to get that to the bare minimum I can, and this actually makes me like happier at my career, and turns out it's also like the best thing I can possibly do for the company. So yeah. The next defining moment is like, I was like, it's in my consultancy era, you can see, and like I had built like quite a few Android apps at the time, and like stuff was starting to get a bit dull, somewhat repetitive. So I figured like, what should I do? And I came up with this idea of like, let's go and speak at a conference because surely that's gonna make me nervous, right? So I started like sending out talk proposals, and they just brutally all got rejected. For like over a year, they all got rejected. Until I had my first successful rejection. So I applied for like droidcon Paris, like the predecessor of this conference. And like I sent them, so they actually replied to my proposal like, hey Jeroen, we can't schedule you because there were lots of great submissions. But you know what, thanks for your effort. Here is a free ticket. If you come over and you like, yeah, apply at our bar camp, then maybe we can schedule it. And I just like threw myself at that. I drove my car to Paris, which is like a 5-hour drive. I paid for a hotel out of pocket, and I just like tried my luck at the bar camp. And I got scheduled. You can see like I'm actually scheduled there, and I was allowed to like give my talk in some kind of like basement room where there were like 7 people in the room. But yeah, like I had done it. And like I think trying my luck at the bar camp like was an excellent use of my time because I struggled so much to like get into conferences, and now suddenly I had like a recorded talk on YouTube, so for every like next application I could like refer to that talk. And I think like my key takeaway for you would be like, there's 2 ways you could look at this, right? Like one, Jeroen got incredibly lucky because I got a free ticket, I got accepted at the bar camp, and the talk got recorded. But like another perspective of looking at the same thing is that I like struggled for over a year, picked myself back up again after all of those rejections, but still kept on going at it. And then when the door got opened only the slightest bit by someone, I threw myself at it and I just like tried my luck. So I think if you're passionate about doing something, like you want to, even something as small as like trying out a new library or going and speak at a conference or trying a new career step, like, sure, of course, you can wait for those things to like cross your path and maybe you find a convenient moment that the timing is right. But you could also just like try and create your own opportunities, right? And like realize that like even people that may appear successful, like I wouldn't regard myself as successful at all, but like I'm standing here on a fairly big stage. Like everyone started somewhere, everyone started small, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, next defining moment. This is maybe the most obvious one. So being a father. So I'm actually a father of 3. I don't talk much about that because like I regard my social channels as being like work focused and Android focused. But make no mistake, this is what fundamentally drives me in life. My family will always come first, and then after that will come my work. And like having kids is like a big or has had a big impact on me. Like you think differently about things, and like one of the things that I want to show is like if you're just like trying to not always be super focused on something or focus super hard, like we tend to be very analytical as like software engineers, and we would like reject or decline pull requests, and we could be a bit harsh in that process. But just adding like a little bit of joy to that, and like giving out compliments if you review somebody's PR, or maybe if you see something that looks off, instead of like outright rejecting the PR, just like asking a question, hey, this looks off, did you intend to do that? Like that can go a long way in like sparking joy for somebody and creating a better working environment. So starting a family, was that a good use of my time? I think it was an amazing use of my time. I would even go as far as saying as it was a complete use of my time because I have no spare time left. You can also see that I haven't been blogging or speaking as much as I used to. But yeah, my takeaway for you for this is like, try to assume good intentions, be kind, give compliments, spark joy. Know that like the work environment is you, right? So you work in the work environment, and the way you handle other employees and the way you interact with each other, you have a say in that. And if everybody like tries to do that in a positive way, it's like this reinforcing thing where you just create more passion in work. Cool. The next defining moment, becoming a GDE. I would actually argue that that wasn't a defining moment. And like, I don't want to be ungrateful or something, and I definitely don't want to like understate the advantage I have had from the program and like how much that has brought me. But the reason why I don't think this is a defining moment is because if you really look at like how Google defines being a GDE, it's about people that like share their knowledge and help other people to grow. So it's really about like blogging and speaking and creating workshops and all of that. But like notably absent here is like skill. Like being a GDE doesn't make me a better developer than anyone else. In fact, like the best developers that I know aren't even GDEs. Like they've never written a blog post or like spoken about anything in their life before. So it's important to like this GDE is, like if you're really keen on like helping the community, then this could be a program to like enable you to do more of that, because like Google would cover some of the travel expenses. But it's not something that like you don't get paid doing this, you don't get a promotion at your work getting this. It's important to like keep that in mind. So instead of like talking about becoming a GDE, I'd much rather talk about like building a social following, which is essentially the thing you would do before becoming a GDE. So like, what I wanted to do is I wanted to speak at conferences. But that didn't go so well. So then I started writing blog posts. But yeah, who reads my blog posts? Yeah, how do I like get people to read it? So I started to like tweet on Twitter. And then somewhere in like end of 2015, if the slide advances, yeah. End of 2015, I decided to like try and grow a following on Twitter just for the purpose of like reaching more people. And you can see that took like a huge amount of effort. I think like in the beginning of 2016, I decided to like tweet every single working day about some kind of like original Android idea. So I would really like, I would have a queue of ideas. I would like work on the queue, prepare the exact perfect tweet, schedule it at the right time. So this was like a lot of work in order to do this, right? And you can see the sheer amount of time it still took me to like reach 5K followers. Like I managed to like double my followings for like 3 years in a row, but like if you double from 150 to 300, it's like impressive to do the doubling, but it's not the same effect as like doubling from 3,000 to like 6,000, right? So this took a sheer amount of time. And if we now look at my blog, so in the beginning of like 2016, I started blogging like once every month, like that was my goal. And you can see that I had like, I've had like a good amount of success with my blog, but I want to like also set the expectations realistically that like I've never been able to reach like 100K people or anything. So like a good blog post from me would be like 1,000 reads maybe. An average blog post like around 500, and an amazing blog post would be around like 8,000. But so like, yeah, I just don't, like, even with all of the effort I had put into that, like, it's still only the community of people that like would consume your content is still somewhat limited. And then the next thing that becomes like apparent from this like from this view is that like creating content has this weird dynamic to it. You have this like short-term effect of like in the first week, most people consume your content, so you're gonna have like 90% of the traffic in the first week. But then like all of the weeks after, like maybe for a year or 2 years, people still continue on consuming it. So you can see that the reads on my blog still went up, and this is like this accumulating effects of all of those 70 blog posts being there for a while. So the question is like, was this a good use of my time? So I have never done this before, so I actually like looked up the math. So I've written 70 blog posts, wrote 4,000 tweets, prepared 14 unique talks. I actually spoke at more conferences, but I tend to like recycle my talk because it takes 40 hours per talk. And if you do the math on this, I spent 132 working days, which is like 8 hours per day or the equivalent of that, doing all this kind of stuff. This was mind-boggling to me because I did this like on top of my normal full-time job, and I also did it like at the cost of like other things I could have been doing in life. So yeah, was this like a good use of my time? I don't know. Like, I think I did this because I enjoyed this, and I still do. I get some kind of like satisfaction from like helping people. So it drives me, but like the amount of time I spent on this, it's hard to justify that, right? And yeah, then I don't know if that really impacted this evolution, but like, yeah, I had to like bring this back. I think like what I want everyone to understand is that you don't need to blog or speak to be a successful developer. Like those two things, they are not correlated. Like you should do whatever like drives you, whatever like you think will spark joy, whatever you think will be fun. But like this doesn't make you a better or a worse Android developer. It's just like a thing that people do. So if you want to do this, by all means do it, but know that like at least for me it was like an insane time investment. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it, but just like know the caveat that like this was a journey to me as well. Next, the promotion that wasn't. So I've actually led like a fairly big team at Philips Hue of like 14 people. And I think this was like the most difficult time of my career because at Philips Hue things simply weren't going well. Like the code base was in a really bad shape because like it had been built as like a startup ID and then always like features added on top. Like it was just a very difficult code base to work with. Management wanted us to like build more features, but we struggled to get the app out of the door without like introducing new bugs already, so let alone new features. That also really demotivated the team, and like this all happened in a time when like Android was rapidly evolving. Like this is around like 2017, 2018. This is when like Android adopted Kotlin, when we got the architecture components. And yeah, I wasn't qualified to like lead a team, to be frank. And I really struggled with this because I cared about the product, I cared about the team, and I really felt like I was doing them short, and I would take that amount of stress home and really like lose my sleep over. And yeah, this was quite difficult, to be honest. And I actually like wrote a blog post about that, so I'm not gonna go in depth in like the stuff that I've learned there. You can actually check it out if you want to. But yeah, like, was that really worth it? Like being a team lead? I don't know. It's difficult to answer that, to be honest. I think like at the end of Philips Hue, at some point we managed to like turn the ship around, and suddenly we were able to like stack success on top of success on top of success, and I'm forever proud of the team of like what we've accomplished. Like that was definitely the highlight of my career. But like a year before that, I would never have thought that we would be able to like accomplish anything just because things were going so bad. And like even if we had some success like at the end, like still we lost some good people. And I still feel like accountable and responsible for that. So maybe you don't want to get that promo. Like, my mental mind now is, so what really drives me is writing code. Like, if I'm not writing any code, then I'm just not happy. Like, it's as simple as that. And in this role of being a team lead, I got pushed into like doing a bunch of reporting, bunch of meetings, bunch of like emails, and I also had like a lot of extra stress because I was responsible for way more things. And sure, like I got a bit of extra pay, but then also like all of the other stuff that I didn't like so much, it was just like completely out of balance. So you could now argue that like what I'd done after Philips Hue, I decided to join a small team of 3 developers, and I wasn't even the lead of that team. So like you could argue that like that was a failure, that was a step back for me, but I think it was a massive step forward. Because I could go back to like writing code, doing the thing that I actually like doing. I wasn't responsible anymore for the technical strategy. Sure, I could still give input, and I still made like a bit more money. So like, if you think about like how do I maximize my work returns, like both monetary as like getting the work satisfaction, like that was like the best thing I could have done. Next defining moment, getting fired. So when I wanted to leave Philips Hue because like things weren't going so well, I think my main priority was to like spend more time with my family. So I wanted to like find a remote job, which would at least save me like 8 hours of commute. But this was 2018, and it was barely possible finding a remote job. And after a very long search, I found like a job at a company called Over. Now they're like acquired by GoDaddy. And this was like a rather big leap for me because I had a stable job as an employee, and suddenly I had to start my own business to go and work for like a company in South Africa, which is like 14 hours flying away. It's still the same time zone. They would pay me in euros. So like after a long process with my wife, we finally accepted that like that would be a risk we were willing to take. And I had planned it perfectly because I was going to take like 3 weeks off, take a break with my family, go on holiday, and then I would start a new job fully energized. And then just a few days into that break, they like called me up and they had to let me go because they ran out of money. I did get like severance, so I'm very grateful for that. But like, yeah, this was obviously like very scary. And then something magically happened. Like I tweeted about it. And all of a sudden, like the Android community really came to like help me out, and you can see the engagement on this tweet. This is probably like my best tweet ever. Like there's literally like over 100 of like real job leads that came out of this. So this was amazing. And if you then look back at like building this social following, was that worth it? Like, yeah, because that happened, that was totally worth it. For me, now, like, it has been totally worth it. But like, maybe I wouldn't have taken this like risk to join a company and start my own company. So to go and work remotely, start my own company, so then I would have never needed it. And then I would have just worked like all of these hours without ever getting any like real benefit from it. So like everything, it's a bit more nuanced. But at any rate, so then I had like a bunch of job leads. It turns out kind of hard to like get a job because like most companies want you to do multiple rounds, so that just takes time. And I also wanted to make a good choice, so I decided to freelance a bit. And in freelancing, I got paid in a different currency, so that was again like an extra step on top. And now I work for a company in the US called Plaid, and my team is actually like 9 hours away from me, so like they're not awake yet, like nobody is awake, and they still won't be awake for like another 4 to 5 hours. So now I'm like, suddenly, I'm in this most extreme form of remote work possible. Like, I work like fully remote, fully asynchronous. I have my own business. I'm paid in a different currency. So all of a sudden, like, it doesn't matter to me anymore, like, who in the world would hire me. This this is like a very a fortunate coincidence from a fact that I would have never been able to take this risk from my stable job to immediately go here, but now my hand got forced, and now that I'm in this mode, yeah, I would never wanted to have it any other way. So was getting fired a good use of my time? Yeah, definitely. It was a very stressful event, but it made me land the job where I'm currently in at, and I'm quite happy there. So my advice would be dare to take some risk, and the worst case is more likely than not better than you think it is. So yeah. And then the last defining moment is stuck in Androids. So actually, when I joined Plaid, it was quite interesting in the beginning because they built an Android SDK, and I had never done that, and I had plenty of time to code, and I built this Kotlin DSL for an end-to-end testing framework. So that was super fun, but after a while, I also got the hang of building SDKs, and then I don't know, I felt kind of stuck. I just I wasn't as passionate about Android anymore as I used to be. Sure, I could go and learn Compose, or I could go and learn this, and that it's not that would be bad, but I don't know, I was missing something. It felt like I was rehashing the same thing. And this is actually somewhere where being a Google developer and expert held me back quite a bit. In retrospect, I should have stopped doing Android maybe a few years ago, but I was too afraid to give up my social following and all of that effort I spent in building out that. I was too afraid to just step away from that, so I stuck with Android for too long than I should have. And at some point, I just couldn't ignore the fact anymore that I just wasn't happy in my job anymore. So then I decided to either I just leave this company and then do Android at another company and maybe it's going to be better, or I just move to a different team and do something completely different altogether. And Plaid had actually acquired a startup called Cognito. They do identity verification. And they had sent out an email a week ago that they were looking for full-stack developers. And I kind of ignored it because I don't know how to do full-stack development. And because I was so unhappy, just right before the deadline, I decided to just YOLO it and send them an email hey, yeah, I'm actually very excited in joining, but do note that I haven't been able to talk to my manager yet, so it was kind of borderline. But I think this is still rather professional, right? That I disclosed that I hadn't spoken with my manager yet. What was somewhat less professional is that I fat-fingered the email and replied it to all of engineering. So that was yeah. And then we had this company offsite months later, and then people told me oh, you're the reply all guy, and I was so yeah, I still do dumb things on a regular basis. And so now I'm doing full stack development. I've actually just built a React-based documentary verification scanner, so a React app that scans ID documents. And it's been a wild ride. It's fun to learn new things, actually. And I now, in the last week, I've done SQL, I've done Ruby, I've done React, TypeScript, a bit of Docker, some shell scripting, also a bit of Android. So I now do a bunch of things, and it's just yeah, it's been exciting. I'm not as good at any of those things as I used to be on Android because Android was my only focus. So I have more of this imposter syndrome. And I also feel more accountable, so I'm working harder than I used to be, but it's fun, so I enjoy doing it. So this would be my final advice, I guess, to stay passionate about your craft is just learning is fun. Continue to experiment, be curious, explore. Even if you don't necessarily need to use this new library to solve that problem, just try it anyway. Or instead of Googling, ask ChatGPT, just keep on trying out things. And so, where do I now go from here? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think the one thing that I'm very sure of is that if I'm not coding, I'm not happy. So at least in the foreseeable future, it's going to involve Jeroen writing a bunch of code. But I used to be able to define myself as being like an Android engineer. Now I don't know how to define myself anymore. Like heck, I wouldn't even know like if I would like apply for an interview, I would no longer know like what programming language I would do the interview in because I'm now changing between so many programming languages. But I'm having fun, and I think like that's the most important thing. So as a wrap up, shipping things is just like exhilarating. So like try to do that. It can even be like small stuff, like a quick bug fix in the PR or something. Think about why you're there, what your unique added value to the company is, and focus on that impact. And then you're probably going to end up doing like more things you like doing anyway. So end up being happier. Create your own opportunities. Assume good intentions, like this way of working where everybody always assumes good intentions, is kind, is open, is curious, is a very pleasant way to work in. If you want to go blogging or speaking, like by all means do that. Like if you think that's going to be fun, then I highly recommend doing that. If you think like this is something you need to do to be better at your craft, like I think there's just way better uses of your time, to be honest. A promotion, like by all means, try it out. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but like keep yourself honest there, right? Like the extra monetary incentive doesn't always justify like the extra crap you're gonna get with it, so try to like keep that well in balance. Take some risk and just like keep on learning. So if you want to read more, this is like, oh, it skipped one. So this is my blog. There's like especially an article on like the lessons I learned being a lead. These are the image credits because I didn't take those amazing images. And yeah, that's it. You can follow me here on Twitter. Thanks so much for coming to my talk.